Despite the immense challenges, Tsutomu Yamaguchi's legacy is not one of despair, but of courage and hope. He remains a powerful symbol of survival and the urgent call for a nuclear-free world. As the years passed, Tsutomu Yamaguchi's story transcended mere survival. It became a testament to the human spirit's capacity for endurance, forgiveness, and advocacy. His unique experience of surviving 2 atomic bombings put him in a rare category, one that attracted global attention and shaped discussions about war, peace, and humanity. Despite the trauma etched into his body and mind, Yamaguchi remained committed to living a meaningful life. He continued working as a draftsman at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, returning to his job after each medical setback. His colleagues admired his quiet strength and unwavering dedication. For them, he was not just a survivor, but an emblem of resilience. Yet the scars left by the bombings extended beyond the physical. Yamaguchi often spoke of the emotional burden of losing friends, witnessing devastation, and confronting a future clouded by uncertainty. He struggled silently with the memories that refused to fade, the sounds of the blasts echoing in his mind. But in the face of this, Yamaguchi chose to channel his pain into activism. He worked tirelessly with hibakusha organizations, pushing governments worldwide to acknowledge the horrors of nuclear weapons and to commit to disarmament. His voice became a beacon of truth, cutting through political rhetoric with raw, lived experience. One of the pivotal moments in his advocacy came in 2009, when he was officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. This recognition not only validated his personal story, but also highlighted the broader plight of double survivors who had often been overlooked in official records. Internationally, Yamaguchi's appearances at peace conferences and United Nations forums underscored the urgent need for dialogue and reconciliation. His testimony was harrowing yet hopeful, painting a vivid picture of the consequences of nuclear warfare while advocating for a world free of such weapons. Beyond formal settings, Yamaguchi touched countless lives through media interviews, documentaries, and public speeches. His calm demeanor and heartfelt words resonated universally, transcending cultural and linguistic barriers. People saw in him a living history lesson, a reminder of the past that demanded vigilance to prevent future tragedies. Even in his later years, Yamaguchi remained active in the peace movement, often traveling to share his message. His home in Nagasaki became a quiet sanctuary, a place where he could reflect on his journey and the family that grounded him. Through every challenge, Tsutomu Yamaguchi's legacy grew, not just as a man who survived 2 atomic bombs, but as a tireless advocate for peace, a symbol of hope for generations to come, and a poignant reminder of humanity's capacity to endure and rebuild after unimaginable loss. In the twilight of his life, Tsutomu Yamaguchi remained a humble man, marked by both unimaginable suffering and extraordinary courage. Though his body bore the visible scars of radiation, it was his spirit that inspired millions around the world. He passed away in 2010 at the age of 93, leaving behind a legacy that transcended borders and generations. His life story was not merely one of survival, but a profound call to humanity, a warning about the devastating power of nuclear weapons and an urgent plea for peace. At his funeral, survivors, activists, and dignitaries from across the globe gathered to honor the man who had become a living testament to resilience. They remembered not just the horrors he endured, but the hope he carried, a hope that nuclear devastation would never again darken the skies. Today, Tsutomu Yamaguchi's name is etched into history books, peace memorials, and the hearts of those who believe in a world free from atomic terror. His extraordinary journey reminds us that even in the darkest hours, the human spirit can shine with unparalleled strength. As we reflect on his story, we are reminded that behind every statistic, every headline, there are real lives, real pain, and real hope. The story of the man who survived 2 atomic bombs is more than history. It is a powerful message that continues to resonate in our collective consciousness. Let his legacy be a beacon guiding us toward a future where peace prevails and such tragedies are never repeated. She was born as Jenny Moran in 1963 in a quiet suburban neighborhood in upstate New York. Her family was average by all accounts. Her father worked at a local factory, Her mother stayed at home. Jenny was the eldest of 3 siblings, and she often found herself acting more like a second mother than a sister. There was something different about her, even as a child, an air of mystery, an intuition too sharp for her age. At just 11, she began keeping journals, not about her own life, but about lives she said she remembered living before. Her parents dismissed it as imagination, childhood fantasy. Jenny claimed she had once been a woman named Clara Evans, who died in 1934 during a house fire in Chicago. She even described the wallpaper of the burning room in detail. The floral design, the yellowing corners, the way the flames danced against the old plaster walls. What shocked her parents more than her words, though, was her drawing. Jenny had never been to Chicago, but the sketch she made of a small 2-story house matched almost exactly with a house that had burned down decades earlier, an image found only in archived news reports. By the time she was 16, Jenny was no longer the same curious child. She had become withdrawn. She often spoke of strange dreams, always the same themes: drowning, burning, running. "I feel like I've died before," she once whispered to her younger sister. More than once, her family sought help. Therapists, neurologists, even pastors tried to make sense of her memories, her personality shifts, her vivid recollections of events she couldn't possibly have experienced. But nothing worked. Jenny wasn't ill. Her mind was sharp, too sharp. Then, on her 21st birthday, something changed. She was found unconscious in the woods behind her home. No signs of injury, no drugs in her system, just silence. When she woke up hours later at the hospital, she wasn't Jenny anymore. She introduced herself as Miriam Lasky, born in 1901 in Krakow, Poland. She spoke with a slight accent she'd never had before. She asked where her family was. She didn't recognize her parents. Her handwriting changed. Her eating habits changed. She refused to wear the color red, the color of fire, she said, and she would cry uncontrollably whenever she saw barbed wire. Doctors considered a complete dissociative identity break, but there was more. Jenny, now Miriam, could recount street names in 1930s Krakow. She spoke fluent Polish. She drew symbols no one could identify. And perhaps most haunting of all, she began to hum a lullaby no one around her had ever heard. A historian who heard a recording later identified the tune as an old Yiddish song once sung in the Krakow ghetto during World War II. Jenny Moran had died. Miriam Lasky had awakened. But this was only her second life, and the darkest was yet to come. Miriam Lasky was not a figment of Jenny's imagination. According to her own vivid accounts, Miriam had been born into a modest Jewish family in Krakow in 1901. Her father was a tailor. Her mother, a teacher who gave Miriam her love for poetry and languages. She recalled specific details: a neighbor named Eli, who gave her sweets every Sabbath, the smell of her mother's rosewater perfume, and a book of psalms hidden beneath a loose floorboard in their home. What stunned the psychiatrist was not just her ability to recount these memories, but the raw emotion behind them. When she spoke of her mother being taken during a raid, her hands would tremble, her voice would break, her eyes would swell with real tears. Jenny had never even studied Jewish history. Yet Miriam knew the structure of a pre-war synagogue that had been destroyed in 1941. She described it in perfect architectural detail. Then came the nightmares. Every night she dreamt of cold, hunger, and footsteps. She'd wake screaming about trains, shouting in languages no one around her knew. "They took us. They burned the books. They made us forget who we were," she mumbled once in her sleep. When a scholar from a Holocaust museum interviewed her, hoping to prove it was all some elaborate delusion, the man left pale and shaken. Miriam had given him the name of a woman, Ilse Grunbaum, who had been presumed missing since 1944. She described a scar on Ilse's cheek, a lullaby they sang together, and a wooden ring Ilse had once carved out of desperation. The museum archives confirmed every detail. The ring was real, Ilse was real, and no one had mentioned her publicly in over 50 years. But there was a deeper layer still. Miriam often repeated a phrase, "They turned us into ghosts before we even died." One night, while sitting at the dinner table with her family, who still called her Jenny, she stood abruptly, stared blankly ahead, and said, "This isn't the first time I've had to forget everything. This isn't even the second." That's when she began speaking of someone new, someone neither Miriam nor Jenny had mentioned before. A woman named Elena. No one recognized the name. Not her doctors, not her family, not even the researchers who were documenting her case. But Jenny, now Miriam, spoke of Elena with dread. She was the one who never wanted to come back. She whispered once, "She died last. She remembers everything. She sees things we were never meant to see." It became clear Miriam's identity was fading too, and something darker, older, was trying to surface. Jenny had been the first, Miriam was the second, and Elena was waiting. The change was gradual, like a shadow stretching across a room at dusk. Jenny's family first noticed it when she stopped responding to her own name. Miriam had long been dominant, but now even she had grown quiet. Instead, the girl, who now barely slept and rarely ate, sat in silence for hours, muttering to herself in a language no one could recognize. Not German, not Yiddish, not Latin. Her voice changed, too. It was deeper, raspier, like it had aged decades overnight. One night she stared into the mirror for almost 3 hours. When her mother tried to coax her away, she simply whispered, "She's watching." That's when the drawing started. She filled notebook after notebook with crude sketches of a tall, gaunt woman draped in black, her face wrapped in gauze, with hollow eyes that seemed to follow you. In every image, the woman was surrounded by fire. In some, she stood in front of what looked like a medieval cathedral. In others, in a cell, with bones scattered around her. One drawing showed her standing over the bodies of dozens of women, each with their mouths sewn shut. Jenny never recalled making them. The doctors were baffled, and then terrified. They brought in linguists to decode the strange language she muttered. One recognized a root word, Nix Hell, a name associated with forgotten goddesses in pre-Christian Eastern Europe. Deities erased from history, worshipped in silence, feared in legend. The deeper they dug, the more unexplainable it became. Jenny, now increasingly referred to as Elena, began revealing knowledge of ancient rites, obscure burial traditions from 12th century Carpathia, and specific references to rituals burned from the Vatican archives centuries ago. She spoke of fire, not as a punishment, but as a door to something worse than death. And Elena? She remembered going through it. She began to write in sleep, pages filled with confessions, chants, and names, hundreds of names. Some had dates beside them, some were scratched out violently, but one name was circled over and over. Clara Voss, 2025. Jenny's mother was named Clara. No one had ever told Jenny that. It was the first time the doctors truly considered what they had refused to believe, that this wasn't reincarnation. This was possession. And Elena wasn't just another past life. She was a parasite, one that had waited centuries for the right host, one that was finally waking up. The atmosphere in the Voss household had shifted. Where once there was hope and desperate love, now thick shadows lingered, both in the rooms and in the hearts of those trapped within. Clara, Jenny's mother, barely recognized her own daughter. The bright, curious child she had raised was gone, replaced by a haunting shell who spoke in riddles and seemed possessed by knowledge no mortal should hold. Doctors tried every known treatment, therapy, medication, even ancient exorcisms. Nothing quelled the fire that simmered inside Elena. At night, neighbors whispered of strange sounds, whispers, footsteps on the roof, the faint smell of burning incense wafting through the cracked windows. One evening, Clara found a hidden compartment beneath Jenny's bed. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, far older than any diary Jenny could have owned. Its pages were brittle, filled with handwritten text in that strange language, but also sketches of the same gaunt woman from Jenny's drawings. The caption spoke of a curse cast by an ancient coven, a promise of revenge carried across centuries. Clara read with growing dread. To bind the soul is to trap the light. To free the shadow is to invite the dark. The family's priest, Father Matthias, was called. He was a man of strong faith, but skeptical of tales involving possession. Yet after a single visit, his demeanor changed. He refused to return, claiming that some forces were not meant to be disturbed. Elena's behavior became more alarming. She would vanish for hours, only to be found standing at the edge of the forest, eyes fixed on a distant hill where an old, crumbling monastery stood, a place forbidden for generations. The town elders whispered stories of the Shadow Sister, a woman who had been burned alive centuries ago for witchcraft but vowed to return and claim what was hers. Jenny's fragmented memories hinted at that dark past. Names, faces, and pain she could never explain haunted her dreams. The parasite inside her was growing stronger, feeding on fear, twisting reality. Clara realized the terrifying truth. The fight was no longer about saving Jenny's soul. It was about preventing the darkness from spreading beyond the walls of their home. The question now was, how do you battle a shadow that refuses to die? The air around the crumbling monastery was unnaturally cold. Trees refused to grow too close, and even animals avoided its shadow. For centuries, the villagers called it Hugelder, still the Hill of Silence. No one dared speak its true name aloud. But Elena was drawn to it. One gray morning, Clara awoke to find Elena missing again. Panic surged through her. She followed the muddy footprints in the garden, past the crooked gate, through the fog-drenched woods until she saw her. Elena stood at the foot of the ruined monastery, staring at a weathered stone archway. Her hands were outstretched, palms up, lips whispering something no mother should hear from her child. Clara rushed forward, but the air grew thick like pushing through water. Her legs weakened. A pressure, as if gravity had doubled, pushed her chest inward. She heard a scream. Was it Elena's? Was it hers? When she finally reached her daughter, Elena turned, and her eyes were no longer her own. "Mother," the voice said. But it wasn't Jenny's voice. It was layered, ancient, cracked by time. "I remember the flames. I remember the ropes. I remember your bloodline." Clara stepped back in horror. The monastery began to breathe. Not metaphorically, stone walls pulsed as if alive. The ground quaked beneath them. A dark mist rose from the broken stone tiles and formed the figure, the same woman from Jenny's drawings. The Shadow Sister. Clara screamed and dragged Elena away. But even as they fled, she knew. It had begun. Whatever ancient force had touched Jenny had now awakened fully. And the monastery, sealed by generations of silence, had been opened once more. Back at home, Clara locked every door and window. But locks wouldn't stop what was coming. That night, Elena sat by the window, humming a tune no one had taught her. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. And on the mirror across the room, written in condensation, were the words, "One must burn, for the other to live." Clara no longer recognized her own daughter. Elena had grown quiet, too quiet. She moved differently, spoke less, and when she did, her words came out with that same layered voice, but worst of all was the mirror. Every night, new messages appeared. Not written with hands, but with breath, forming on the glass like whispers made visible. The blood is memory. The path is chosen. You cannot unbind what has been awakened. Desperate, Clara began searching through Jenny's belongings. In a locked drawer of her old writing desk, she found what looked like a leather-bound journal. Pages yellowed with age, ink faded, but still legible. The handwriting wasn't Jenny's. It belonged to someone named Matilda Drexler, a name Clara had only seen once before on the charred cornerstone of the monastery ruins. Inside were detailed descriptions of rituals, warnings, and a bloodline that had been hunted for centuries. Women in the Drexler line had always borne the mark: visions, unnatural talents, and eventually, the calling to the monastery. Jenny had tried to break the cycle. But the rituals required more than silence, they required sacrifice. One passage chilled Clara to her bones: the child may be spared if the mirror claims the mother. Clara didn't sleep that night. Instead, she watched Elena, who now muttered incantations in her sleep and traced symbols on the bed sheets with her fingers. By dawn, Clara made her decision. She placed the mirror, the same one that whispered threats, at the center of the living room. Around it, she arranged candles, just as described in the journal. Elena sat nearby, calm, almost expectant. Clara whispered the old names, lit the flames, and looked into the mirror. At first, nothing. Then, the reflection changed. She didn't see herself. She saw Jenny, her face pale, eyes sunken, mouth open in a scream she couldn't hear. Behind her stood the shadow sister, draped in black, arms stretched forward, toward Clara. The mirror cracked. A thin line ran from top to bottom like a scar. And then came the voice, "Choose." Elena stepped forward, her small hand gripping Clara's. "Mommy," she said, her voice her own again, frightened, confused. "What's happening?" Clara couldn't answer, because she knew the ritual wasn't complete. Not yet. And the mirror was waiting. Clara stared at the cracked mirror, heart racing. The words still echoed in her ears: choose. Was it asking her to choose between herself and Elena, between past and future? The journal had warned this moment would come. If the curse was to be broken, a soul must pass through. Not die, but cross. The room grew colder. Candles flickered. Elena clutched Clara's hand, terrified. Suddenly, Jenny's voice came soft, desperate from inside the mirror. "Mom, don't let her take Elena. She wants the bloodline to continue. Stop her." Then the shadow sister appeared again, tall, veiled, her hands rising. She pointed at Elena. "No." Clara shouted. She stepped between them and faced the mirror directly. "I'll go." The shadow sister paused. The mirror pulsed, then shimmered. Jenny's reflection smiled faintly, as if relieved. Clara turned to Elena one last time. "You're free now," she whispered. And then she vanished. Not burned, not broken. Just gone. Elena stood alone in the room. The mirror, now whole again, reflected only her. Outside, dawn broke over the forest. But in the monastery ruins, a new candle lit itself. The ritual was complete. Or so they thought. Years passed. Elena never returned to the monastery. The events of that final night were buried deep in her memory, wrapped in silence like a wound that refused to close. She built a new life, got married, had children. To the outside world, she was whole again. But behind her eyes lived a quiet storm, because part of her had never left that forest, and never would. Then, one day, her daughter Amelia came to her holding something strange. A cracked, dusty mirror she'd found in the attic. Elena's heart dropped. The mirror, it was supposed to have vanished with Clara. "How did you find this?" she asked. Amelia shrugged. "It was just sitting there. When I looked into it, I saw someone." She smiled at me. Elena took the mirror and stared into it. At first, just her own reflection. Then behind her something shifted. A silhouette. Clara. Not ghostly. Not monstrous. Watching. Waiting. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The mirror shimmered, and then cracked further. That night, she couldn't sleep. At 3:33 a.m. the old forest behind her house filled with whispers. Leaves rustled though there was no wind. Her lights flickered. The air turned thick, as if the world was holding its breath. She approached the mirror once more, trembling. A voice echoed, not Clara's this time. Deeper. Older. The bloodline was spared, but the dead remains. Then she saw them, the Watchers. Dark figures at the edge of the glass. Eyes like coals. Standing just behind Clara. Not hostile, but not kind either. Ancient sentinels of a pact never fully broken. She understood. Clara had taken her place, but the price wasn't paid in full. It never was. The Watchers were not there for her. They were there for Amelia. A new generation. A new chapter. Elena screamed, shielding her daughter. But the mirror went black. Solid. Empty. The next morning, the mirror was gone. So was the forest behind her house. In its place, fog, endless and thick. And on her doorstep, a single candle, flickering. She lit it. And far away, in a hidden corner of the world, another monastery long forgotten shook ever so slightly. The ritual was not over. It had only just begun.